If you want 5 more years with your dog, add this to their bowl every morning. Watch him hesitate before he jumps onto the couch tonight. That half-second pause right there is the first thing you can slow down starting tomorrow morning, and the fix costs less than the treat you bought him yesterday. There is one thing vets quietly add to their own dog's bowls every morning, and it is not a pill, it is not a prescription, it is already sitting in your kitchen right now. Most owners already add some kind of fat to the bowl, thinking that alone is enough, and it almost never is, because the wrong oil, the wrong amount, or a habit that only happens some mornings quietly cancels out whatever good it was supposed to do. Before I tell you what actually works, I want you to understand why what you are probably already doing is not. I have spent close to 20 years treating dogs in clinic, and if there is one habit I wish every owner started years earlier, it is this one. Comment below and tell me where you are watching from tonight, because in a minute you are going to want to grab a pen. If you are already replaying the slower stares and the stiffer mornings in your head, feeling like you should have started this months ago, let that go right now. Nothing about today is about what you missed. The only thing that matters is what goes into the bowl tomorrow morning, and the fact that you are watching this at all, thinking hard about your dog's next 5 years, already tells me plenty about the kind of owner you are. Most people wait for a limp before they start paying attention. You are here before the limp, and that timing is worth more than anything sitting on a shelf. Here is the myth the pet aisle wants you to believe, that only the $50 joint chew or the fancy oil pump with the gold lettering on the label can actually help an aging dog, and that anything from a regular grocery shelf is somehow inferior. In my clinic, that simply is not true. A properly portioned tin of plain sardines or a correctly dosed bottle of fish oil delivers the same active compounds those pricier products are built around. 2 fats called EPA and DHA, the parts of fish oil that do the actual work. What decides whether it helps your dog is not the brand or the price tag, it is the dose relative to his weight and how clean the source is. Get that part right, and a $1 tin does the same job as the $50 chew. Get it wrong, and neither one helps, which is exactly why so many owners already tried fish oil once, saw nothing change, and quietly gave up. Nobody makes money off you opening a can from your own pantry, so the marketing budget goes toward convincing you that only the branded version counts. That is not a conspiracy. It is just where the incentives point, and a plain fact deserves to be said as plainly as the marketing denies it. A tin of sardines sitting next to that $50 chew is really just a glass of water sitting next to a bottled electrolyte drink. One does the essential job for a fraction of the cost. Here is what is actually happening underneath. As a dog ages, a low-grade inflammation runs quietly through the body, and it does not announce itself with a fever or an obvious symptom. It just wears things down. The cartilage in the joints gets thinner, blood vessels lose a little flexibility, and the signals running through the brain slow down. Omega-3 fats, EPA and DHA, build directly into the walls of those cells, joints included, and crowd out the more inflammatory fats that come from processed kibble. Think of a joint low on omega-3 like a hinge that has been running dry. It still moves. It is just louder and stiffer every single day. And the coat works the same way, since it is built almost entirely out of fat and protein, and hair happens to be some of the fastest growing tissue on his whole body, which is exactly why it shows a shortfall first, and shows a fix first too, usually within a few weeks. I am not chasing a cure here, I want to be honest about that. What we are really chasing is what I would call health span. The years your dog spends actually feeling good and moving well, not just years technically alive. So here is what that actually looks like from your side of the leash. A dog that used to leap straight onto the bed and now pauses first, gathers himself, or takes the stairs one at a time instead of 2, is not getting lazy. That is stiffness, and it is usually the very first sign. It is completely normal for a dog to be a little slow right after a long nap, stiffness that walks off within a few minutes on its own. What is not normal is stiffness that never walks off, or the same hesitation showing up every single day. If any of this sounds like your dog, stay with me because the fix is coming, and it is simpler than you think. Before we get there, if this is the first useful thing you have picked up this week, go ahead and hit subscribe and leave this a like. It genuinely helps this information reach more owners looking for exactly what you needed to hear tonight, and that means more dogs getting looked after a little earlier. There is more your dog is already showing you. A coat that used to catch the light and now looks a little dull or a little flaky is not just a coincidence of the season. It is often the very first visible sign that something in the diet is running short. Picture a lawn that has gone a little pale, and think about how it greens back up once you finally start watering it consistently. That is exactly what a fish oil coat looks like a few weeks in. A slower response to his name, or a foggier look in his eyes if he is a senior, can be early cognitive slowing, not simple disinterest, and it is worth watching closely, not panicking over. But there is one sign that moves past ordinary aging entirely. A limp that lingers past a single day, instead of walking off within a few minutes the way ordinary morning stiffness does. That one does not wait for breakfast. That one needs your vet. Left alone, this kind of wear starts small. A little stiffness after a nap, easy to write off as personality, as him just getting older and slower, that is all. But left longer, that stiffness starts limiting how far he actually wants to walk, and the muscle around a joint he is not using anymore begins to thin, which leaves that same joint even less supported than before. It becomes a cycle that feeds itself, quietly, one short walk at a time, long before anyone ever calls it arthritis. The walks get shorter without anyone deciding they should. The naps get longer. And by the time a limp shows up and finally gets your attention, that quiet cycle has usually been running for a while already. And it does not stop at the joints. That same low-grade drift reaches the rhythm of his heart and the vessels feeding his brain. It is part of why the dogs I see who are sedentary and under-supported tend to decline faster, across the board, than the ones who stay active and well-fed. Joints, heart, brain, coat, they are not separate problems. They all draw from the same pool of fat in his diet, which is why one small change in the bowl tends to show up as several improvements at once, instead of just the one you were watching for. That is worth sitting with for a second. You are not choosing between fixing his knees or fixing his coat. It is the same fix, doing quiet maintenance in several places you are not even looking at yet. I think of a 10-year-old Labrador named Biscuit, who came in stiff, and whose owner had simply chalked it up to old age. 8 weeks of 1 measured teaspoon of fish oil every morning later, he was back to meeting people at the door with his tail up, instead of staying curled on his bed. Around the same time, I saw a senior terrier mix named Pepper, whose coat had been dull for over a year. 3 sardine mornings a week for 6 weeks brought back enough shine that her owner asked me if she had started using a new shampoo. Small habit, real difference. And it is exactly the one I am about to walk you through. So here it is, the thing I would want in my own dog's bowl. A small amount of plain sardines packed in water, or a properly measured dose of fish oil, stirred into breakfast every single morning. That is the whole reveal. What matters now is getting the amount right for his size, because this is where most owners get it wrong. If you are going the sardine route, always choose the plain tin packed in spring water, never the ones in oil, tomato sauce, or anything with added salt, and never the smoked or seasoned kind sitting on the same shelf. For a small dog under 20 pounds, 1 to 2 sardines, 2 to 3 mornings a week, not every single day. A medium dog, between 20 and 50 pounds, can have up to 3 sardines on those mornings. A large dog over 50 pounds, 4 to 5. This is not a food you leave out all week. It is a measured topper that goes in on specific mornings, portioned to his actual size, not to how much he begs for more. Mash it into his regular food rather than handing it over whole, and he will barely notice it is there beyond wanting to lick the bowl a little cleaner than usual. Fish oil fits some routines better, and here is the number I actually use with my own patients. Roughly 20 to 55 milligrams of combined EPA and DHA per pound of his body weight every day. For a 20-pound dog, that lands around 500 to 1,000 milligrams total. For a 50-pound dog, closer to 1,000 up to just over 2,000 milligrams. Check the label for the actual EPA and DHA content, not just the total oil volume, since that is the number that actually matters, and start at the low end for the first 2 weeks so his stomach can adjust. Most owners start noticing the coat looking shinier and the stiffness easing, somewhere between 3 and 6 weeks of doing this consistently, not overnight and never from a single spoonful. A word of caution that matters more than the ingredient itself. Too much fat at once, whether from oily sardines or an over-poured glug of oil, is the biggest risk here, because it can trigger pancreatitis in a sensitive dog, an inflamed pancreas that turns into a real stomach crisis, especially in small breeds or ones with a history of pancreas trouble. Think of it like handing a fried feast to someone who has been eating light for months. The stomach simply revolts. Repeated vomiting, a hunched praying stance with the back end up, a painful belly, or a sudden refusal to eat. Any of those means a same-day call to your vet, not a wait and see. Skip cod liver oil for daily use entirely. A single tablespoon carries roughly 13,000 IU of vitamin A, and stacking that on top of a complete diet, day after day, can build toward toxicity over months, showing up as low energy or sore joints, which is the opposite of what we are going for. It is a bit like taking 5 vitamin pills when the label clearly says 1. The nutrient stops helping and starts stacking up as harm. High daily fish oil doses can also quietly use up his vitamin E, so if you are dosing on the higher end, look for a product that lists added vitamin E on the label. And regardless of what else is in the bowl, garlic, onion, grapes, raisins, xylitol, cooked bones, chocolate, and alcohol stay off the menu completely. One more thing, never start sardines, fish oil, and some new joint powder all in the same week. A dog's stomach handles one new addition at a time far better than 3 thrown in together. The same way you would not overhaul your own diet 3 ways at once. So give it a week between each new thing you try. That is really the whole habit. 1 measured fat, added consistently, every single morning, rotated sensibly so his stomach never has to deal with too much change at once. It will not undo 10 years in 10 days, and I would rather tell you that honestly than promise you something I cannot deliver. Nobody can guarantee you 5 more years, and I would not trust anyone who tells you they can. What I can tell you, after 2 decades of watching this play out in exam rooms, is that it helps him spend the years he has left more comfortably. Moving easier, sleeping better, showing up at the door with his tail up instead of staying on the bed. That is not nothing. For a lot of dogs, that is everything. If this helped, subscribing and leaving a like puts this in front of the next owner scrolling past at 11 at night, wondering the exact same thing you were an hour ago. Tell me in the comments how old your dog is right now, because that number is exactly what this whole video was about protecting. Go put your hand on his head tonight and let him lean into it the way he always does. That is really all this job has ever been about.